Hello, everyone watching us on the Preferred Walk-Ons, a college football show about college football. I'm Jeremy Taché. That is Dimitri Zamaris.
What up?
Yeah, that's the perfect intro for him. And if you tuned in to our preview episode, you know that this is a college football show about college football, as we described it on the Preferred Walk-Ons intro.
Not much else to
Yeah,
say.
not much else to say. No, so basically what we're gonna do on these next few episodes is preview each of the quote unquote Power Six conferences. The reason we're starting with the American Athletic Conference is we're going in alphabetical order. So next week will be the ACC, and then we will progress so on and so forth. But basically, the spot that we're in is we want to give you guys as much information as possible on each of these conferences, sort of our thoughts on who you should be looking out for, who's maybe a sleeper team to thrive in this conference, and any of these conferences. And then obviously, who we expect to do the best and the worst. So we really wanted to just kind of get started with previews. And then once the season starts, we will, as we mentioned in our preview episode, we will have weekly recaps of the previous week and previews of the following week. So we'll keep you guys as up to date as you need to be on everything college football. And we're really excited to get started. So we're going to start with the American Athletic Conference, and Meech will sort of kick things off in terms of, what teams we're going to go with here. Again, we're going in alphabetical order. So he will kick us off and give us some of his analysis. And that's sort of the way things are going to go through here. So, Meech,
Right. So let's try and keep these. Let's try and keep these about 35 minutes or less, because we had a dry run in it. We went a little longer, so we're diving right in here.
Yeah, Meech and I are really good friends also. So the problem is that we can just talk for a really long time, which should be helpful for you guys. There's good camaraderie. But at the same time, we both don't know how to shut up.
It's true. It's my biggest fault. But admitting it is the first step to improvement.
We're in a good
space. Let's dive right in, Jeremy. Let's start off with a team that was very surprising last season. Since we're going in alphabetical order, AAC, Cincinnati, 11-2 last season, 6-2 in the AAC. I'm sorry. They finished up third in the AAC East behind UCF and I believe Temple. So super surprising last year with the freshman quarterback in Desmond Ridder. People thought they were going to take a step back with all the injuries they had coming into the year, with Kevin Mahoon missing the season with a knee injury on defense. But Luke Fickell had them looking great last season.
Yeah.
What do you expect to see from Cincinnati this year?
I think Cincinnati's the team that probably gives UCF the toughest shot in their side of the conference, right? Because like you mentioned, Ridder is back. He was a freshman last year and played pretty consistently. For a freshman, he was just about as good as you can get.
20 touchdowns to 5 interceptions.
Right. Well, and that's the big part of it too. It's that, this is a team that's sort of defense first. And at least they were last year. And, they only had a couple of games where they didn't play well defensively. Obviously, one of them being at UCF on a night where it was, college game day and all of the hype around the game. And so they came up a little bit short. It happens. They'll get UCF at home this year. That's a big difference.
Right.
And so, they're a team that I expect consistency from. I don't really see much regression happening for them. I see progression on the offensive side because when you have a freshman quarterback you played, he's only going to get better.
Right.
And I fully expect them to be major competition in the AAC East.
Right. And so they start off the year, obviously, with those two tough out-of-conference games.
Right.
With UCLA, who they get at home, but they went on the road last year and beat UCLA in Los Angeles last year. But then, of course, traveling on into Ohio State, we don't know what Justin Fields and that offense is going to look like for Ohio State, but the talent is there where it shouldn't be a problem for Ohio State to handle Cincinnati. But, I mean, you never know. I mean, they could be still getting their footing at the time, and Cincinnati's not a team that you can easily, just put away. You're going to have to earn the victory.
Right.
Like you said, Ritter's back. Michael Warren's back at running back after running for over 1,300 yards last season and almost 6 yards carry.
Yeah.
They lost their leading receiver, and they're replacing 3 of their 5 starters along the offensive line. But, I mean, Fickle has done a tremendous job recruiting offensive linemen. And that's one of the big things is they're bringing Luke Fickle back. So they could have lost their head coach. So everything is speaking to a resurgence for Cincinnati again this season.
Anytime that there's a team in the AAC that performs at a high level and brings their head coach back the following season, it's a win. Like it's just
you have
win.
to
At this point.
You have to chalk that up as a W.
It's just retention. Retention of a head coach is something that's a factor in this conference more than any other. Because
coaching stability is a premium in these, group of 5 conferences, with the AAC obviously being the top tier of that.
Well, and that's why I mention it, because since this is the top tier of the group of 5, more often than not, you have the top tier of group of 5 coaching, and thus they're the main spot where, Power 5 schools are going and recruiting their next coaches from. So when you can have a really good season like Luke Fickle did at Cincinnati, and a Cincinnati program can maintain him and bring back their quarterback, you expect
it's a recipe for success.
Yeah, it's going to be a successful season. The Ohio State game is obviously interesting because, and we'll get into this, UCF is the team in this conference that everybody always anticipates, at least in the last couple of years, obviously.
It was Houston before UCF, but yeah.
It was Houston before UCF, but the last couple of years, UCF has been the team that everybody expects to make noise on a national stage. I think most people would expect in this conference. Same deal this year. But between Cincinnati, and we'll get into a couple of others later, there's actually a few different options for teams this year.
There's a lot of really strong out-of-conference schedules.
Right. There's strong out-of-conference schedules, and UCF doesn't have the strongest out-of-conference schedule. Now, they have a solid one, and they've
got Stanford
at this point. But between Stanford and,
Pitt.
able to play,
Pitt.
Oh, yeah, no, that's what I was about to say. Is Stanford and Pitt, at least it's an ACC school. If UCF runs the table, they've sort of earned the reputation of, okay, now they're on the national stage again. But some of these other schools have some actual powerhouse out-of-conference schedules that if they're able to pull off the upsets, if Cincinnati is able to go into Ohio State and win a football game, now all of a sudden you're a team that is en route to an undefeated season in the playoffs. Like it's going to be an interesting season for Cincinnati because I think the expectations should pretty much be through the roof.
So we talked about coaching in the AAC making a huge difference because coaching hires is what can really start your program back on an upward trajectory.
Right.
East Carolina kind of failed that with their last head coach, but they bring in Mike Houston at East Carolina now, who was dominant while as the head coach at James Madison in the FCS these last couple years. They don't really have a lot returning on either side of the ball, which hurts, but they do notably probably have their QB of the future with Holton Ayers there, who started his first game against UCF last season. And I really kind of like this is going to sound old school. I like the cut of his jib, though.
The cut of his jib, yes.
The cut of his jib.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, Holton Ayers is he's good. Like, that's a good young quarterback, especially in the AAC where there's ordinarily not a ton of defense. Like, what I often refer to the AAC as sort of Big 12 light. And it's it's a similar style. Like, I think Big 12 may be a little bit deeper, although to be honest with you, they're basically the same conference at this point. But ECU having a good young quarterback, like a kid that can, toss the rock a little bit. He's definitely got wheels.
He's tough as all hell too.
Oh my God. Yeah. He got beat up in his first game against UCF. I mean, he got rocked.
And he was still back there slinging the rock. Like
it was nothing.
That's one thing I think if you're ECU, that's something that they have now is hope, because Mike Houston brings in a very interesting sort of system from James Madison. I mean, it's not like recruiting to James Madison is very easy, regardless of it being a powerhouse. So now he's in Carolina, in the Carolinas. That's a much more fruitful recruiting ground. He's in a bigger conference, and he has a quarterback that can jumpstart the rebuild.
Yeah.
I mean, they only won 3 games last year, only 1 win in conference. I mean, it would be hard to not improve with everything that they have here.
Well, that's exactly it. They're going to improve, but what should the expectations be? Like, the expectations are probably, hey, it'd be awesome if we could get bowl eligible. And in this conference where a lot of teams haven't really gotten worse, it's going to be tough.
Right.
But you have your quarterback, you have your coach, and that means there will be improvement, even if it doesn't necessarily show in the record.
And for what it's worth, Tyler Snead, they had a freshman wide receiver last year who only played in 4 games, so he retained his he was basically a redshirt. They use
Right.
that new redshirt rule where if you play in less than 4 games, you can still have another year of eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the 4 games that he played as a freshman last season, Tyler Snead had 15 catches for 236 yards and 4 touchdowns and averaged 16 yards a catch. So it's not like Allers is going to have absolutely no weapons. They lost Nate Harvey, who was arguably the best defensive player in the conference last year,
And they lost
and their
Trevor
leading
Brown.
tackler. Yeah. So, they lose their best offensive and defensive players. And this is a team that only won 3 games, but outside of NC State, they have Gardner Webb, William and Mary, and Old Dominion as their out-of-conference schedule.
Right.
There's no reason they can't win more games than last season and potentially push for a bowl game, but I think there would be a lot to be excited about, especially in what is essentially a year 0 for your new head coach.
Right. And like you just mentioned, Gardner Webb, William and Mary, those are a couple games you should win, right? If you're at AAC school. So then from there, all you need to do is pull off a couple of upsets in conference, and who knows what happens.
It's not like ECU is.
Sorry, I was just going to say late in the year they got UConn and Tulsa. So you got 2 teams on the bottom half of the conference that if you are 2 wins away, maybe you're, from bowl eligibility, maybe you can just channel something and get there, So that's the hope for an East Carolina.
And it's not a program that, East Carolina, not even 4 years ago, was very good. So if they can just get back to that, I'm sure they would be satisfied.
Yeah, and no, you're good. And speaking of new head coaches, moving to the next team here, Houston. Houston's probably the biggest upside downside, biggest range of possibilities of any team in this conference, because Houston could very well, to point this out for those of you that don't know, Dana Holgorsen, former West Virginia head coach, is now at Houston, brings back the Eric King, their superstar quarterback, maybe the best player in the conference.
I think without question.
If he's healthy, he is the best player in the conference at this point.
Right.
That's ruling out Mackenzie Milton. Because Mackenzie Milton just simply will not play this season, right? We're just not putting him into the conversation, so it's a different conversation, obviously, than what it would be. But Derek King is the best player in the conference, and he has Dana Holgorsen, who obviously knows how to produce a ton of offense out of the quarterback position. So Houston could very well be a powerhouse. That said, they were 8-5 last year. They were just as talented as they will be this year, and in fact, defensively, they're losing quite a bit.
And their defense wasn't even good last year. That's the thing.
That's the problem.
They were one of the 30 worst defenses in the country. They lost. They didn't even play Ed Oliver correctly last season. But they lose their only first team All AAC guy in linebacker Austin Robinson's now gone. He was their leading tackler. He had 6 sacks, 5. So he was all over the field. He's gone now. And they're playing a lot of teams that can light up the scoreboard this year. They're playing Oklahoma week 1, which is another one of those premier out-of-conference games we were talking about. But that game might end 138 to 144. That's going to be a basketball game.
Well, that's everybody's favorite game to start the year. So if you're looking for what's the week 1? Because obviously the Gators and Canes play before everybody else. But if you're looking for actual week 1 of college football, what's the game that I want to make sure that I'm sitting down, having some chips and dip and drinking a couple beers and watching a game? It's the Houston-Oklahoma game, because it's going to be fireworks from the moment it kicks off. So that's both teams scoring in the 50s, I would be absolutely shocked.
So, and then that's the thing, though. So they play Oklahoma, who we know can score. They play Washington State, who, even though they're replacing Gardner Minshew,
they're going to score.
They're going to score. They got North Texas. Mason Fine might be the best group of 5 quarterback in the country, and they're going to put up points. Then, of course, in conference, they have UCF, Memphis,
Right. Goodness gracious. Yeah, when you really think about it, Houston could end up scoring-wise having a bottom 10, maybe even the worst. They won't be as bad as UConn, but they could have a bottom 5 to 10 defense in terms of scoring, just because of the schedule. Because when you do play Oklahoma and North Texas and Washington State, you might even go win those games, but you're going to give up 30 to 40.
And And like we said, those are just their out-of-conference games. So
Right, let alone when they have to play, at UCF and they have to play Memphis, which will be a back-and-forth game, really probably deciding their side of the conference. That said, what are your expectations for Houston this year? We've talked about how good they could be. We talked about how many points they're going to go up. We talked about the fact that they're going to score. But what are your actual expectations of what they're going to actually do this season?
I want to believe in Houston because you know how I feel about Dana Holgerson and offense, and I love De'Aaron King, but 8-5 again feels like what we're looking at here. The defense is just going to be awful. So unless the offense is bringing back so much and was a top 10 unit or top 20 unit last year in the nation. So I see pretty much of the same, but who knows? In a couple years, Dana Holgerson could have that thing clicking.
Yeah, I will say, while while thinking that they're going to go to Oklahoma and win is kind of an outlandish thought, right? Like they're likely not going to do that. That said, I mean, let's be real. Jalen Hurts is in there. A great quarterback. I like Jalen Hurts a lot. We'll talk about that, episodes down the line. But it is a new quarterback in a new place at home for the first time. Following up back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners, like there's a lot of pressure there, and it could catch them off guard. If they do, they're off to a crazy season. Although we thought the same thing a few years ago when they beat Oklahoma. But I will say the biggest reason that I do think Houston might come back and have a better year is not even necessarily because of the fact that I think their team will evolve that much from what it was last season. It's that when you have the best player in the conference and your biggest rival in your side of the conference in Memphis, who we'll talk about next, I think is probably going to take a step back this season, then that's me. And we
I know. We'll talk about it.
But if you're in that type of position, it leads to success ordinarily. You got the best player, and you're in probably the weaker side of the conference in terms of depth.
I don't think that's debatable.
Yeah, even though you might lose a couple out of conference games, there's a very real possibility that they win this conference just because they get in, and then all you got to do is go beat one team in a conference championship game. So again, the upside is there, and we're both really high on Houston just because we like fun. I think we're both proponents of fun, and Houston almost without a doubt, because the expectations are different than what it is with UCF, will be the most fun team in this conference. That's not really very debatable.
Right. So let's move on, like you said, to Memphis. I mean, this is where I disagree with you. They're bringing back so much on both sides of the ball. Their biggest question mark, obviously, is going to be replacing Darrell Henderson.
Right.
Who led the nation in rushing last season, and they're replacing 3 of their 5 starters along the offensive line.
And don't forget Tony Pollard as well. Don't forget Tony Pollard.
Yeah, I know you're a huge Tony Pollard guy.
I'm a Tony Pollard stan. Tony Pollard was so good and so underappreciated. But anyway, continue. I apologize.
So you're right. They lose their 2 best playmakers, I think, without question, right? They lose 3 of their 5 starting offensive line. Those are two facts that you cannot dispute. But their best offensive lineman is back with Dustin Woodard, who's a first-team All-Conference. So, you have that guy in the middle of the offensive line that has some experience, can help the young guys come along. And I know you're not a fan of Brady White, but if anything, he is consistent. And he's got DeMonte Coxey at wide receiver coming back, who is an explosive playmaker.
He is.
Maybe not to the level of Darrell Henderson or Tony Pollard, but he will step right in. I mean, was it Anthony Miller a couple years ago kind of filled that role of just the guy that was single-handedly seemingly carrying the offense.
We don't talk about how that team didn't win. That Memphis team,
they can't get past UCF, man.
They can't do it. It's crazy. That's
going to be their biggest question, right? They're going to win a lot of games in conference, and they're going to win a lot of games out of conference. I mean, they play Ole Miss in week 1. I'm predicting it right now. They're going to beat Ole Miss by more than 20 points. Ole Miss is going to be bad, and Memphis is going to roll in there and just beat. I mean, Ole Miss is going to Memphis for the pleasure of getting their ass kicked. So, and then they play Southern, then they play South Alabama, then they play Navy, then they play UL Monroe. That's a 6-0 team, right?
Yeah, and then they're at Temple, which is like their first test after Ole Miss.
And who knows what Temple's going to be, you know?
Right? I mean, when you do look down the schedule from there, there's a very real possibility.
It sets up pretty for them.
Well, Memphis doesn't get UCF this year. And that's like
UCF.
Memphis fans must just be like salivating over the fact that they don't have to play UCF this year because
they want to beat us though. If they want it to be UCF versus Memphis in the conference championship and finally get their sweet victory over UCF.
Yeah,
but
it won't happen, but it's
this is the thing getting back to your point where maybe Houston could make a run here in the West is they play Temple on the road. Right. They play Houston in Houston, and who knows what USF is really going to be, but at the end of the season, we'll know what they are, and you get them on the road.
Right, and that's my biggest – so to go to the other side of things where I do think Memphis could take a step back. You're not wrong in that – especially if they go in and they beat down an SEC school, regardless of the regression of that SEC school, that's going to feel good. And you're going to have a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum going forward. And when you can play with confidence, especially with a quarterback who's returning, that does change things, right? I mean,
we haven't even brought up their defense, which brings back.
Oh, their defense is going to be good.
They're 3 leading guys in sacks and 4 of their top 5 tacklers. And this is a conference, like you said, where having a good defense can really be the difference, you know?
Or having a good defense could mean nothing because everybody can score.
Everyone else is just going to score anyways,
right. Yeah. And that's my concern, right, for Memphis, because last season you saw a team that had a plus defense in this conference, one of the better defenses in this conference for sure. And the way that they won games was by absolutely pounding the ball down your throat and having Brady White do just enough to then put them over the top. I do agree with you that Coxie is a legitimate playmaker as a wide receiver. He's going to be a game breaker. There's going to be a couple of games that they win just because of the connection between White and Coxie, for sure. That said, what we mentioned right at the top of talking about them, they're losing 3 offensive linemen and their 2 best running backs. I don't know Memphis to be a running back factory, right? I mean, I know Memphis to be solid at the running back position, but when you're losing 2 dynamic playmaking running backs that are both off to the NFL, drafted in the first 4 rounds.
Right, both of them.
Both of them. Pollard also a difference maker at the kick return position, which matters in this conference because it seems like every week there's somebody returning a kick for a touchdown. I get really concerned about their ability to get ahead and then stay ahead because that's a lot of what they did. A lot of it was get ahead early and then pound the rock and pound the rock and pound the rock and pound the rock. And, I mean, the perfect microcosm of all of that was in last year's AAC championship game when you had a team that got ahead and was pounding the rock, and as soon as they weren't running the ball well, and as soon as they were put in 3rd and long, and Brady White had to go make plays, they
got into some trouble
tremendously. And then
I don't think you're wrong.
And so my concern for Memphis, I still think Memphis is the 2nd best team on their side of the conference. I still think there's a chance that they have a better overall record this year by a few games. They were 8-6 last year. They could very well, I mean, there's no reason that they couldn't be near undefeated this season. They could lose just 1 or 2 games.
This is a 10-win schedule for them.
It's absolutely a 10-win schedule for them. But my concern is that with other schools taking a step up, we'll talk about Tulane in a bit. We'll talk about, we talked about Houston. USF shouldn't be as horribly inconsistent as last year. I do get a little bit concerned for Memphis that if Mike Norvell doesn't make a legitimate change, if he and the offensive side of the ball don't make a change in approach and they just try to do the same thing of we're going to pound it, we're going to play defense, I think Memphis could end up really not living up to the expectations that they have for themselves this season. That's my concern. Not a bad year, just not
no. I understand
that they're hoping for. Where you just said, I mean, look at it. That's a 10-win schedule. They could even be undefeated with an SEC win going into a conference championship to play UCF, or they could lose a couple of games, in the middle of that schedule that could be really frustrating. The games at Temple, at Tulsa, home against Tulane. Those aren't gimmies.
Those aren't gimmies.
Because we don't know what Memphis is going to look like on the offensive side of the ball. That's my only concern.
All right, so Jeremy, low on Memphis. Dimitri, high on Memphis. We'll keep that in mind. Let's move on. We can keep it quick with these next two teams. Navy, 3-10 last season, 2-6. They finished 5th in the AAC West. I don't want to take anything away from Ken Niumatalolo, one of the best coaches given the circumstances in the country. It's surprising to me still that no one has poached him off of the Navy, coach, like just taking him from Navy and started rebuilding their program. But there's just not a lot to be inspired about with Navy. It feels like while they are on the decline, they're declining at the same time as their nemesis Army is on like a steep up climb.
Yeah.
So I just don't know. They lost their Zach Abe's gone. He had 14 rush touchdowns last season. They have their best player on offense back in Malcolm Perry, but their defense lost so much, and it was atrocious last year anyway. So I'm not sure there's a lot there.
Here's where I'm at. The preferred walk-on show. Huge fans of the Navy, not huge fans of the Navy football team.
Right.
Big fans of the Navy. Go America. That said, I mean, it's just going to be really difficult for them to win football games in this conference. Because of the way that they have to recruit and thus obviously and play offense as a result of that.
They have so many disadvantages, and with being in a conference in the AAC, it's making it harder on them. Whereas you see Army, they're in a conference, but they're in the Mountain West where the talent disparity isn't as huge. Whereas, in the AAC, it's teams like UCF, USF, Memphis, Houston, Cincinnati. Those are borderline Power 5 programs, right? They have the resources of Power 5 schools. So Navy just doesn't have the resources, and they don't have the recruiting to keep up with the upper echelon of the conference. And it's only going to be so long where they can keep cannibalizing the weaker teams in the conference. And I think we saw the beginning stages of that, unfortunately, last season.
Yeah.
Now, would I be surprised if they come out and win 7 games next season?
Never.
Of course not. It's Navy. Right. So
exactly. That's going to be our thing. We're both going to be down on their ability to even be bowl eligible. And that said, anytime they win a game, we're going to go, because it's Navy. Like that. Of course they won. It's Navy.
They're running a triple option. It's Navy. Like
it's impossible.
Discipline.
It's Navy. Yeah. So. It's going to be the same conversation. A team that's on I would say totally different trajectory, totally different spot is SMU.
I think this is your side chick team in the conference. I think you really.
SMU is so my side chick team in this conference.
Yeah, there we go.
Because I'm like openly.
Now we're talking.
I was openly, in terms of like teams that I love, openly cheating on UCF with Houston. But SMU's the one that's like.
You were.
Oh yeah, it was. I was telling everyone. But down below, just like on the side, SMU. Ooh. SMU.
Shane Buechele.
Well, that's what it is.
You're a big Shane Buechele guy?
I'm a huge Shane Buechele guy. I'm not even really a huge Shane Buechele guy. I just think Shane Buechele in this conference is going to do really well. He wasn't like so terrible at Texas.
I would say he was above, like he was average, if not slightly above average at Texas.
Right. And so
it's just they got one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the country on their team now. So he became replaceable.
Exactly. And so now someone like Shane Buechele, who was above average at Texas, is now at SMU in a conference again. I call it Big 12 Light for a reason. He's going to go out and freaking slang it. He's going to slang it. And
they have a former Big 12, head coach with Sonny Dykes there.
Right.
Who we saw what he did at Cal. With Jared Goff and all those guys. So
right.
I mean and James Porch is back, who's probably one of the best receivers in the conference last season. So
Right.
you have your best receiver back. You have a quarterback who I'm pretty sure he was a 5-star coming out of high school.
Oh, yeah.
And he has starting experience in college, and you have Sonny Dykes calling the plays. They're going to play in a lot of shootouts too, though. They also have North Texas.
Right.
They also have North Texas on the schedule. They also have TCU on the schedule.
North Texas, the honorary.
Stop scheduling North Texas.
The honorary 13th member of the AAC. I think the interesting thing when you do look up and down their schedule, at Arkansas State to start the year and against North Texas at home is not an easy 1-2. Like they could actually be 0-2 after those two games.
Right.
But the thing that does intrigue me is, again, anytime a team can avoid playing UCF, that's probably a good thing. Just in today's version of the AAC, look, we're biased. We're both UCF alum. We're not going to act like we don't think UCF is great. We think UCF is great.
They have a lot of my money. I have no choice.
Yeah, I have no choice but to think they're great. Okay, and I do think they're great. And I'm biased, but I'm also realistic. They're a great team. So in modern, maybe we're having a different conversation next year. But right now, if you can avoid UCF, that's a good thing. They're avoiding UCF. And their problem though is, I think it's weeks 8 and 9 or their 8th and 9th game.
Houston and Memphis.
At Houston, at Memphis. That's where their season could kind of come to a little bit of a halt because
their 4 toughest games probably are all on the road too, with TCU and USF also.
Exactly. And so I expect SMU to be bowl eligible at the very least.
I think so too.
I think they'll be bowl eligible. I think that their dream season is 9 wins.
Yep.
Like dream season.
That's everything, like top of ceiling, yeah.
Right. That's top of ceiling for them. Because they have some really tough games against some very good teams. This is no longer, I don't think that this conference, where in years past, really up until, I mean, I guess this is not like a super old conference, but the last couple of years, everything has remained pretty much chalk in terms of its
preseason favorites are who hold through. Yeah.
Right. UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and ordinarily South Florida on one side. And then Houston and Memphis on the other. Those 5 teams, really it's 4 teams. USF has been kind of up and down, but
they're in the hunt, but they're never really a threat. Yeah,
exactly. They're, again, UCF bias showing a little, but also we're just telling you the reality.
They're the little brother. Let's get real spicy.
Let's just get real. But the reality is this conference starts to hold chalk a little bit more like the other main conferences do because those programs have established themselves. There's not as much volatility when I say I love SMU. That doesn't mean they're going to win the conference. That just means I'm high on what their expectations should and could be. So I think there's a chance they could be a 9-win team. I think they could upset a couple of people because they have really, really, really good quarterback play in comparison to the rest of the conference, and that it's a former 5-star recruit that went to Texas that played pretty well and just had to leave because somebody else came in that was better. And so Shane Buechele is going to come in and play very good football on the offensive side, and SMU might pull off a couple of upsets is all I'm saying. They're a fun.
And my final thoughts on SMU too is their defense should get a lot better. They were not very good, but they weren't Houston bad last year, and they're bringing back almost 80% of their production on that side of the ball, which ranks top 20 nationally. So, I mean, there's a lot of room to grow on the defensive side of the ball. And if Shane Buechele carries the offense to the level that you think that he can, that is a bowl-eligible team. So let's move on now. We mentioned them a lot already. South Florida started off last year 6-0, finished 7-6, right? Or were they 7-0 and finished?
I think they started 7-0 and finished 7-6.
Yeah, so they won 7 straight and then lost 6 straight, which is pretty much the most USF thing I can imagine. Charlie Strong, this is a big year for him, man, because he was one of the hottest names.
Sorry, did you know he just bought a $2 million home in Tampa? Fun fact. Looks like
maybe he's settling in there, yeah. I mean, he might as well be because he's not getting any Power 5 offers at this rate.
No.
Really, their season comes down to, what is Blake Barnett going to look like in his 100th year of college eligibility? He's just I think we said this when we first tried to record this. He's just the human version of meh.
Yep.
Meh. I mean, Blake Barnett, sure. And that's just kind of how I feel about the program in USF as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like they're recruiting poorly either. They're doing a pretty good job recruiting, all things considered.
Every year, they're a team that everybody thinks could take the turn and be a great team in the conference, and they have all these athletes, but for whatever reason, they haven't been able to put it together. I'm not trying to do this bias thing. They just, even I want them to be good.
They're just uninspiring. There's just nothing there that it's inspiring.
Yeah, like the thing. So I was on a podcast last year called the War on I-4 podcast. We talked about USF and UCF every week. And the guys that I spoke with, Tito Bonach and Josh Appel, shout out to you guys. They, every single week that I came back, was like, all right, both teams are undefeated. They were like, nah, man.
Setting up for a good one at the end of the year, boys.
We're awful. Like, I promise. And I was like, what do you mean? There's no way. I'm watching they're winning games. I made comparisons to the 2013 UCF team because I was like, hey, they just skated by in a lot of games, and there's a shot here. No, man, USF was hanging on by a thread right from the start. And so
you were catfishing yourself.
I was. What's going to be interesting is you're totally right. It all comes down to Blake Barnett. Like, they're talented on both sides of the ball.
Good luck with that, right?
Right. But that's the problem. And look, there's a very good chance. I mean, when you look at their schedule, they get Wisconsin at home to start the year. Now,
right.
We know USF is not like a prolific home field advantage. We are aware of that.
Come on, it's not even really a home field.
Right. But sure, at least it's not at Wisconsin was sort of my point, where you have, I think it's Cincinnati's at Ohio State. And
all right, like, I hate to be that guy, but can I be really real with you real quick?
Yeah.
There's going to be more Wisconsin fans at that game than South Florida fans.
Okay, you're right. But
I'm just like, I'm not even trying to troll. That's just what's going to happen. Think about it. If you're a student in Wisconsin, it's a vacation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So you're right. But either way, they get Wisconsin not on the road is how I'll say it.
Okay.
And that's like maybe winnable. I mean, Wisconsin has a new quarterback. I know Alex Hornibrook was not exactly good, but you never know. Yeah, I always think Wisconsin's overrated. They'll pound it down your throat, and that's probably what'll happen with South Florida. They're big offensive.
Jonathan Taylor will go for like 350 yards.
Exactly, and it'll be a 17-13 game. But if they can start the year well, even just playing Wisconsin well, when you do look at their schedule, then it's Georgia Tech. They beat Georgia Tech last year. South Carolina State, SMU, UConn, BYU, Navy, ECU, Temple, Cincinnati at home, Memphis at home, and then at UCF.
It does set up very favorably for them to go on a run in the middle of the season.
Really winnable schedule. Like really favorable schedule early in the year. That if they get past Wisconsin and Georgia Tech, there's a chance they're undefeated all the way up until UCF. I mean, because you get your two really toughest games the rest of the way at home. And BYU, maybe, right. If you want to say that's your other toughest game, that's also at home. So there's no reason that the expectations shouldn't be absolutely through the roof for USF. Because even if we're meh on Blake Barnett, even if we don't necessarily feel like they're capable of taking that next step, one thing that is the commonality, man, it's when you bring back your head coach in this conference, when you bring back your quarterback, and
just like we said earlier.
Right, and most of your tough games are at home. That sets up for success. And so all you got to do, not that it's easy, but all you got to do is upset UCF, and now all of a sudden you're in a conference championship game. And it's a rivalry game. You never know what happens, man, especially if both teams are undefeated. Then all the spotlight's on you, all the pressure is there. Everybody in America would be rooting for South Florida.
Because, for sure.
Because in that situation, you want to upset UCF. So it's one of those years where it's like they could go 7-6 again, or they could be the team that really makes a run in the AAC East.
I think their floor is bowl eligibility, so they should at least be bowl eligible.
And
they better hope Blake Barnett doesn't get hurt because both their backup quarterbacks transferred, which is not great.
Concern.
And he was hurt last year a lot. So, well, let's move on though. We're pushing 40 minutes here. Let's go to Temple, who lost somehow 2 head coaches in one off season, which is incredible. Only in the AAC type move.
Amazing.
Jeff Collins left to Georgia Tech, obviously revamping them. And then Manny Diaz took the job. And then Miami was like, yo, Manny, how about you just come down to South Florida? And he's like, that's a bet. And so he left
I'm just
Temple
gonna
as well.
stay. Yeah, Manny Diaz is trip. We talked about Manny Diaz and everything he's doing in Miami. We'll get into that next week. But shout out Miami for having the quickest trips either in or out between Manny Diaz's quick stay in Temple and Bol Bol's legendary career with the Miami Heat, being a Miami Heat for like 4 seconds. Temple's the weirdest team in that way, in that like I have no idea what to expect from them because
they lost their offensive identity with Raquel Armstead being
right.
And they lost their best receiver with Ventrell Bryant leaving, right? But Anthony Russo looked amazing at quarterback the last half of the season.
Yeah.
They have returned 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen, which is huge. So even if they have a new running back, you assume they'll be able to move the ball. Rod Carey, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about him as a head coach, but they return a decent amount on both sides of the ball. They're like nationally like in the middle,
right,
for what they return on both sides of the ball. And this is just a team that has had an identity over the last couple of years, like even back to when they had Matt Rule before Jeff Collins.
Yeah,
where they play tough defense, they're going to run the ball, and it's worked. And sure, they've not made it past UCF, but not a lot of teams in the conference have.
Right, the last couple of years, yeah.
So
my thing is, sorry, do you want to finish that up or?
I mean, they were 7-1 in conference last year.
Well, that's exactly what I was about to go to. So they're a team that's bringing back enough. They're not bringing back everybody. They lost, Armstead, and they're in a position where they did, like you mentioned, sort of lose their offensive identity in that way.
And they lost their best players on defense. Like what they lost on defense was premium level talent. With Michael Dodge was Dogby was first team all conference. Rock Ya-Sin and Delvin Randall were both first team all conference, and Rock Ya-Sin was a second round NFL draft pick.
Rock Ya-Sin.
So those aren't.
Also one of the dopest names ever in college football.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So that's what I'm saying is with the premium loss of talent on both sides of the ball and going through 2 head coaches like we kind of joked about, that's a lot to overcome. And they'll be bowl eligible. This is a team that I'm not worried about them getting to a bowl game. But can they stretch it like they did last year to 8 wins or 9 wins or even 10 wins? That just feels less likely.
Well, the good news for them is in this conference, we talk about quarterback play. I mean, that's the same deal in any conference, but especially
college football, a quarterback can be.
A quarterback changes everything. I mean, we literally saw, and not to always go to UCF, and we promise to limit this when it comes to other conferences, but like this is our one chance, okay? So we saw it with Mackenzie Milton. Like we saw, it was that simple. You brought in a quarterback that could play football, and all of a sudden you were the best team in the conference and one of the best teams in the nation. And Anthony Russo, that's a good young quarterback, man, and he's got experience now. He's a redshirt junior.
Right.
He's been around a little bit. Now this is going to be another head coach. How does that change things? But when you do bring in a new head coach, at least there's stability there. Like we talked about with De'Aaron King at Houston, like he's coming back and they have a new head coach. So yes, there's an adjustment, but you have a good talent.
And you figure the system will somewhat be the same, right?
Yeah.
It's not like they're going to come in and try and run an air raid.
It's not going to completely change. You've been recruiting to a certain type of talent for a while, and that's kind of where it's going to go. And that being said, also, it's Maryland and Georgia Tech are their tough games. They're out of conference games against, teams from Power 5 conferences. And I guess the spot where we are is like, those games are at home and Temple plays good defense and who knows what happens. So like you said, bowl eligibility is absolutely going to happen. The thing is 7-1 in conference is a little tough to duplicate.
It's how much better than bowl eligibility can they repeat the same dominance in conference, which just doesn't feel likely.
I doubt it. So they're going to need to win a couple of those out of conference games early. And so again, 8-5 last year, 8-5 feels about right. Maybe not, maybe a 9-win team,
All right. Yeah, no, I agree. Let's move on. So SMU was your side chick team. To me, Tulane is that team for me. 7-6 last year, 5-3. They were tied for first in the AAC West, but I believe Memphis ended up going to the conference title game for just having head-to-head win. But they're like a sneaky fun team to watch. Willie Fritz runs one of the more unique offensive systems in the country. It's like if the spread and the triple option kind of had a baby, almost is like one way I would describe it.
I love that.
They have the best jerseys in college football, I think. Like quietly, like the most underratedly fire jerseys in the country.
There's a reason our color is what it is. And we literally, when we first had preliminary conversations, just so everyone can get a little peek behind the curtain, when we first had conversations about this show, and Meech was like, so what do we want the graphics to look like? I said, just make the Tulane jersey a graphic. And I think maybe he pitched that idea first, like, what about Tulane colors? And I said, yes.
Yes, definitely.
That much we know for sure.
The only crying shame is we couldn't.
Good.
Yeah, the only crying shame is we couldn't use the little wave, the angry wave logo.
The angry wave is just incredible.
So the biggest question here is, like, what are they going to do at quarterback? They brought in the LSU transfer last year, whose name is escaping me. But he was not the answer that they thought he could have been.
No.
The good news is they bring back their best, both of their running backs who pretty much carried the offense last season.
Mm-hmm.
They lose Charles Jones II and their second leading receiver, Taron Nkalade. Mm-hmm. But they have Patrick Johnson might be the best defensive player in the conference at defensive end. 16 tackles for loss and 10.5 sacks last season.
So ridiculous.
And then on top of that, he's playing defensive end. He had 5 pass breakups and 4 forced fumbles. And somehow that was only good enough for an all second team conference nod, which is incredible. But they lose some, they're in the same boat where the talent that they do lose on defense is like premium level talent.
Yeah.
Second team all conference cornerback Donnie Lewis Jr. is gone. He had 3 interceptions last year, 17 pass breakups. And then they lose second team all conference linebacker Zachary Harris and Roderick Teamer Jr. Those were the team's 2 leading tacklers.
Right.
So there's a lot gone, but at the same time, the schedule sets up nicely for them.
Yeah.
I mean, they get FIU. They get Auburn at home. Like, I don't know what Auburn's going to be this season. This is a make or break year for Gus Malzahn, right? I'm not saying that they're going to beat Auburn, right? I'm just saying it's possible. Or they just got to keep it close, right?
Yeah.
And then Missouri State, then they get Houston at home. Who knows what Houston's going to be? I mean, if they lose big to Oklahoma to start off the year, are they as confident? And then, Army and Auburn as out-of-conference away games feels tough, but
it's not impossible, man. I don't think that it's impossible.
I like what they're building. That's all I'm going to say is I really like what they're building.
Well, it's similar to where I'm at, I think, with SMU. It's just the same way you mentioned. It's like the upside is there. They could have a very good year. Do you expect them to win their conference? No. Do you expect them to go and rattle off 10 or 11 wins? Probably not. But Tulane is going to be better. They are building something, and what's nice is, just like you mentioned, they have an identity now. We know what Tulane is. A few years ago, we had no idea what Tulane was. We had, and I'm just going to make my own, I remember watching Tulane and saying, yo, there's Nico Marley. That's my guy.
Right, exactly.
That's all you knew about Tulane, was just they had Nico Marley on the defensive side running around like a crazy person and making every single play.
Literally every tackle.
Every tackle was made by Nico Marley. And now we're in a position where, you look at Tulane and you go, okay, I know what they could do a little bit offensively. Like, whether they have a quarterback or not, it's almost irrelevant. They're just one of those plug-and-play systems. Do I think that they could be the team that, like, shakes things up in the conference? Sure. So, like you mentioned, they get Houston in week 4 at home. Houston could be 3-0, feeling themselves a little bit. Maybe they beat Oklahoma, or they could be totally screwed, mentally, because they lost to Oklahoma, maybe a couple injuries, and all of a sudden. So could Tulane be a team that, like, shakes things up a little bit? Sure, they could absolutely be a team that shakes things up in this conference.
And that's the thing that teams in the middle of this conference should aim for, is just like, hey, can we make some noise somehow, right?
Yeah.
So let's move on now. We don't have to spend a lot of time on Tulsa.
Ugh.
Zach Smith in at quarterback after transferring to Baylor. Philip Montgomery's done as well of a job at Tulsa as I think you can.
Yeah.
Some like they just have those every other couple years they'll have like a really nice season where they win 8 or 9 games. I just don't see it this year. Michigan State on the road to start is not great. They play Oklahoma State. Wyoming could really probably beat them.
Dude, listen
3
to the
wins.
stretch here though. They were 3-9 last year, and you just said they play Michigan State, and then they play Oklahoma State weeks 1 and 3. But listen, so they're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th games of the season.
Right.
At Cincinnati, then home against Memphis, then at Tulane, then home against UCF and Houston. They're going to lose all 5 of those games probably.
Yeah.
Right in a row. And that just crushes your season. And if ECU has any semblance of a bounce back, like we talked about, they play at ECU to end the year. So if ECU's looking for bowl eligibility and Tulsa's lost 5 in a row, it could be, not that I think Tulsa is bad. I just don't think they're as good as any of those teams I just named in a row. So they're going to have a 5-game losing streak at one point. And it's just, how do you overcome that? And especially when you have Michigan State and Oklahoma State, like they won't reach bowl eligibility. But could they maybe get to 5 wins? You hope so, but probably not. I mean,
if everything breaks right, they could win 5 games.
Yeah, and that stinks. That just stinks. So, I mean, that's really all there is to say about Tulsa, to be honest.
So this is what final thought on Tulsa. They feel like the lower tiered version of USF, where there's just nothing inspiring there. It's just they are what they are, right?
Right. Where when you're breaking it up into tiers in this conference, it's Cincinnati and UCF, not Tulsa, Houston and Memphis. Those are the 4 teams that are the top tier of the conference. USF is kind of in this weird tier by themselves right after that, I would make the argument, because they've been in the top tier. They really, even though they're considered in the top tier, they've been a mid-tier, right? So they're kind of in this thing by themselves, because at least
they have the talent of a top-tier team.
And then from there, what we're talking about, it's the Tulanes, the Temples, SMU. Those are probably the 3 teams right after that. And then that bottom tier where it's Navy, it's Carolina.
And then there's like a pile of dog crap, and then there's UConn, Yeah,
well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't even want to talk about UConn.
You want to knock UConn out real quick before we get to UCF?
Sure. Let's
just skip. First. Okay, so all right, 1-11 last season for UConn, 0-8 in
conflict. Civil conflict forever.
Which sadly is probably going to die next year when they move back to the Big East. I just want to – this is the only thing I want to talk about UConn. So they bring back 91% of their defensive production from last season, right?
This is my favorite.
Which is second most in the country. So in our little preview packets that I made for us, I put yards per game on offense and defense, points per game on offense and defense, defensive S&P plus, which is an advanced defensive metric, and defensive efficiency, which is ESPN's advanced defensive metric, right?
Right.
So last season on defense, this is probably the worst defensive season any team has ever put together in major college football, I think.
Ever.
617 yards per game, which was 130th out of 130. 50 points per game, which is 130th out of 130th. They ranked 130th in defensive S&P plus. So defensive efficiency 50 is an average. That would be an average defense, right?
Uh-huh.
Can you guess what UConn's defense had in defensive efficiency last season? 50 is average.
50 is average. I feel like because of everything you just said, it's got to be around I don't know, 10, 11.
So it's even lower than that. UConn's defense UConn's defense had a 2.4 defensive efficiency last year.
Yeah, that's horrifying.
2.4. Oh. And then on offense, they lost their 5 leading receivers and their best offensive player, David Pindell, the quarterback, who was actually legitimately pretty fun to watch last season.
He was kind of fun.
He had 2,000 passing yards and 1,000 rushing yards, which is pretty hard to do, especially with a team that's just absolute dog crap all around you. And now he's gone, and he was the team's leading rusher and passer. So they're not gonna, if they lose to Wagner in week 1, they're not winning a game. It's just not happening.
UConn's so bad. It's an embarrassment. And
it's good that they're leaving the conference, honestly. For
good.
them, it's
for
good.
everybody. It's good for everybody.
So
I'm happy they're gone. That's it. That's all I got to say. Bring it back.
Never forget the conflict, though.
Never forget the civil conflict. We will promote it forever, and I'm so sad.
We should make T-shirts. We should make civil conflict gone but not forgotten
at the game.
Yeah.
At the game. It's at UCF. Well, absolutely. We're on it. If someone wants to design that for us, that's watching this, you just let us know. All right, so on to the best team in the conference and the name.
The best team in the country.
Yeah, best team in the country. I apologize.
All right, let's relax.
Best team in the country, best team in the conference. It's obvious.
2017 national champions?
Yes, 2017 national champions. It's a fact.
We have a banner.
We have a banner. What else? What do you have? Okay.
Yeah.
So the UCF Knights. UCF has just kind of absurd expectations for a team that's starting a new quarterback. Like no matter what happens, it's a new quarterback. Darrell Mack only played a couple games at the end of last year. For those of you that are like, what do you mean UCF starting a new quarterback? I know nothing about college football, and I live under a rock. Mackenzie Milton is our Hawaiian god
Prince
and hero. And
we stand a legend.
Yeah, he's the greatest college football player to ever play in the state of Florida. It's a fact.
All right. All right.
No, just relax. But no, so Mackenzie Milton, who's a quarterback at UCF, had a just horrific knee injury last season at the end of the year against USF. UCF still went on to win that game. They won in just insane fashion against Memphis.
Twice, yeah.
Right. But they won in insane fashion against Memphis in the conference championship game in this unbelievable comeback victory in which Darrell Mack had an out-of-body experience and just played out of his mind. They then lost to LSU with Darrell Mack quarterback in the Fiesta Bowl. Yeah.
No, that was
what bowl?
It was the Sugar Bowl, wasn't it?
No.
It was the Sugar Bowl.
No, the Sugar Bowl was it the Sugar Bowl? Why am I forgetting everything?
They were in Louisiana.
No,
yeah.
they won the Peach Bowl.
No, you're right. It was the Fiesta Bowl. It was the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm an idiot. That's my fault. That's my fault.
Oh, we're sounding like idiots on our own school. Nonetheless, I repressed it. So the spot.
Yeah, that game never happened.
Yeah, the spot that UCF. Well, when LSU ends up with all sorts of recruiting ineligibilities, we're going to say that the win streak continued to like 30 plus. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So UCF is in this position where they have Brandon Wimbush, who transferred in from Notre Dame, who was beat out last year by Ian Book at Notre Dame. So he comes in as a grad transfer. Darrell Mack is another option at the quarterback position as he, took over from Mackenzie Milton. He's now going to be, I believe, a junior. A true junior at the quarterback position. And there's Dylan Gabriel as well, who's the true freshman, who is the lefty from Hawaii, who seemed to impress everybody so far during practices. And, it seems like there's at least a slim chance that he could win the job. And then there's obviously Quandre Jones as well, who is a great young quarterback. It's just, the quarterback position is loaded with talent for UCF. The good news for whoever that quarterback ends up being is that this is one of the most loaded offenses in the entire country at the skill positions.
Right, and not even just at the skill positions. They're bringing back 3 first-team all AAC offensive linemen, and then, like you said, at the skill positions, Gabe Davis and Trey Nixon at wide receiver, Otis Anderson and Greg McCrae, and Adrian Killens all in the backfield. It's just crazy. And then on defense too. Sure, they lose. The middle of the defense is going to be a huge question mark with Jasinski and Titus Davis gone at linebacker, and especially Joey Connors.
Yeah,
they're both gone now. But they've recruited so well up front on defense, the defensive line especially, and their linebacking. The linebackers that they've brought in over the last couple of recruiting classes are all pretty good.
Yeah.
And then they have first-team all AAC safety Richie Grant, who might be the best secondary player in the conference. Then they have Neville Clark locking. Yeah, they have Neville Clark locking down one side of the field at corner. And, I make fun of Nate Evans because I always feel like he's out of the play. But how he still was the team's leading tackler last year with 99 tackles.
Right.
And he was first team all AAC last year too. So the defense was bend but don't break in literally the textbook definition of that word last year, where they gave up 424 yards per game on defense last year, but only surrendered 21 points per game, which is incredible.
I don't know how they did it. It was a freaky year. It was a freaky year.
Let's end on this. Who do you want to see play quarterback, and then what do you see as the outlook for UCF this year?
Okay, I want Darrell Mack to be the quarterback.
Me too, big time.
I think the upside is just
that Memphis game showed me everything I needed to know. I needed to see. Like what he did in the game against Memphis. I've never seen Brendan Wimbush do that.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you have such ridiculous skill on the offensive side of the ball, and you'll have theoretically a full off season of, getting accustomed to the playbook. Because remember, Josh Heupel was a new head coach last year with a new playbook. It was a new playbook for him. It was a new playbook for McKenzie Milton. The fact that McKenzie Milton thrived the way he did was just a testament to what a great player he is, and also how much
the best player in program history. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, without a doubt. And so when you have a new quarterback come in, to be able to have a full year and maybe a playbook that's even more adjusted to Darrell Mack's skill set. He just throws.
Yeah, because now you're planning for that, right?
Right. And he throws such a pretty deep ball. Like one of the most beautiful deep balls.
And not to be
a college quarterback.
Not to be corny, but he runs like a Mack truck. He's literally a human battering ram.
It's insane. And so to be able to have him, as long as they feel like he's not. So the knock on Mack would be, he might turn over the ball too much. Because we did see him turn over the ball, even in the Memphis game. He turned over the ball. He fumbled a couple of times. There are going to be interceptions. But Brandon Wimbush's biggest issue all of college was turning over the ball. Like at Notre Dame, his biggest problem.
And being extremely inaccurate.
Yeah, it was inaccuracies. And so if you need someone that's just going to get the ball in the hands of playmakers and has that big playability, it's Darrell Mack. And so that's my hope. And that said, I trust that whoever is the best guy to win the job, like whoever wins the job, it sounds like from the very beginning, from everything we heard about Brandon Wimbush, like he came in knowing he was going to have to compete for the job. He wasn't guaranteed.
Everybody got a fair shake. I don't think that's the case.
Well, and so my thing would be is that I hope Darrell Mack is capable of winning the position. I would hope that that's the spot that they're in, because that means that this kid has a really bright future. If he doesn't win it, am I okay with Brandon Wimbush at quarterback? Absolutely. You have the senior.
If he's who won the job, that's fine, right?
If he won the job, then that means he played very well in this offense. And maybe that's all it is. Maybe all it took was putting a bunch of really good offensive players around him. I mean, Notre Dame's had talent, but like UCF skill players in that system, maybe that fits Brandon Wimbush better. Who knows? We don't know that yet. But again, outlook-wise, I mean, the hope is an undefeated season once again. I mean, when you really look at it, sure, playing at Pittsburgh is a tough game. And every single team, the difference between UCF and every other team in this conference is that UCF has a gigantic target on their back.
As they should. Yeah.
Nationally, as they should.
Right.
Because they've been obnoxious and they deserve it.
Right.
That's not a bad thing. Like that's a good thing to play with. But now it's a second straight season of that. They were undefeated last year. They lost to LSU, mitigating circumstances, but still, you lost to LSU. The streak is over, and now people really want to show you, all right, go back where you belong. Is like
exactly
from the Power Five. Like, all right, the winning streak's over. You're no longer one of us. And UCF's whole thing is going to be to show that they are. So
we're still a top 25 program.
Exactly. Yeah. And so beating the Stanford game at home in a weird way could end up being it's definitely a top 5 game in program history. If not, arguably top 2, considering it's Cincinnati's home game was number 1 with College Game Day with all of that. Obviously that was like the big game. But this Stanford game means a lot.
Talking non-bowl games too?
Yeah, I'm talking non-bowl games, non-conference championships. Yeah. I'm talking like regular season football games.
No, I agree.
This Stanford game is gigantic because
in terms of implications too.
Yeah, if you beat Stanford, then you absolutely should go undefeated. And you should be right back in that conversation, knocking on the door of the college football playoff where you won't get in. And
I will say this.
New Year's Six game, and yeah, go ahead.
I will say this. Biggest thing, middle of the season, if they've gotten past Stanford and Pitt, that away game against Cincinnati is going to be
gigantic.
Gigantic. And if they get past that, I have confidence they won't lose the rest of the season.
It's smooth sailing, yeah.
But getting over those initial hurdles is going to be the biggest thing.
The good news is they basically have a bye week before the game at Cincinnati because they play UConn at home.
Right.
So it's good to know. I mean, look, their toughest stretch is weeks 3 through 6 because it's home against Stanford, at Pitt, home against UConn, at Cincinnati. To be able to have UConn there instead of a team like theoretically like Tulane, right?
Right.
Like a team that
someone you actually
someone
have
you got to step up and you can't just sleep on. Like you can fall asleep and they're still going to score 30 or 40 points against UConn. So that's the good news, is that they do have sort of a week where they can like take it easy, regroup, and be prepared to go into Cincinnati, a team that obviously after you absolutely embarrassed them on national TV last year is going to want to crush you.
Right.
But I think the expectations, unfortunately, they're in this world now where expectations are, number one, conference championship or bust. That's for sure. If you don't win the conference, it's a disappointment of a season, period. If you don't go undefeated, there's going to be a large segment of your fan base that's disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't go to a New Year's Six bowl game, everybody will be disappointed. Like, New Year's Six bowl game is the goal, period. You know, it's win the conference, and if you win the conference, you're probably the team going to the New Year's Six bowl game. It's kind of that simple. So those are the expectations, and honestly, there's no reason they can't live up to them. Like, no matter who the quarterback is, that offense is so loaded, and the defense will have enough playmakers. That group of guys that's going to be true sophomores this year, between Randy Charlton and a couple of others, one guy.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Dylan Lester might play a little slot corner. There's enough there that they're going to make some plays on the defensive side of the ball. I have no concerns.
All right, so that's going to do it for the AAC conference preview, I guess is the. So we'll be back next week with the AAC. I'm sorry. So look forward to that. If you like this video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already, and share the video with your friends. And if you want to get involved in the conversation, go ahead and post in the comments, and we'll try our best to respond to everybody that we can.
And feel free to tweet us. And also, we blatantly lied to your faces and said this episode would be about a half hour. We were wrong. We went, I think, over an hour.
My timer says an hour and 10 minutes.
Oh, my God. We went so long, and I'm so sorry. We'll try to keep the rest of these to about 45 minutes. We watch every AAC game because we're UCF people, so we have a lot more detail here. We'll keep the rest of them a little more around base. Maybe we'll skip over a couple of really crappy teams in other conferences, on like what we just did here, and we'll keep things moving. But thank you if you did watch all the way through. Thank you so much for doing so. Again, feel free to tweet us, let us know what you think. Subscribe to this YouTube video, and thank you guys for watching our first episode.
See y'all later.